And then we will be starting first with Mark Hardcastle. If you're not familiar, our first speaker is going to talk with us about restoring harmony when your world is out of tune. Mark graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1982. He works today as an airline pilot and a conductor. In both of those roles, he's seen lives go out of tune, and over time, he's recognized patterns used by successful people to restore harmony in their own lives and the lives of those around them. His first book, The Symphony of Your Life, is a 3-time first-place Colorado Independent Publishers Association award winner. Dare you to say that 3 times fast. Yes. And it will be for sale directly after tonight's presentation. Please help me welcome Mark Hardcastle.
Anybody recognize this?
Yes.
What is it, Ryan?
On.
A conductor's baton, very good. Really not much to it, though. Just this simple wooden handle here and this white plastic tip. But for something so basic, it's powerful. In the right hands, this little baton can inspire violins, brass, percussion to create meaningful symphonies. And the good news is you have one tonight. Tonight, you are conducting the symphony of your life. But the bad news is, from time to time, our symphonies go out of tune. If you've ever been to a fifth grade band concert, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so the question then becomes, how do we restore harmony when our worlds go out of tune? How do we respond when fortune challenges us at difficult times? How about if I tell a story to get us started? Time from my life. That all right? Rod doesn't mind. Anybody else? Everybody you okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. May 18th, 2012. I was over in Moab, Utah with a bunch of my friends that go there every year to ride mountain bikes. And we were on our first ride of the trip. We came out of the condo that morning, and all of us were wearing our spandex bike shorts. Yes, you had an image. You're welcome, Gene. We were also wearing our form-fitting, muscle-exposing bike shirts, our very expensive wraparound sunglasses, and our multicolored helmets. Looking good, ready to ride. So we made our way up to the Porcupine Rim Trail, trailhead. And now mind you, the people I was riding with were some pretty hardcore riders. But me, not so much. So I volunteered to hold down the rear guard while they all took off down the willows ahead of me. And now this particular trail, about 45 minutes in, crosses a paved road. So about that time, I looked off in the distance, and sure enough, there they all were, all 10 of them popping up on the pavement back down into the dirt on the other side. And eventually, I made my way down there to that road, skipped up on the pavement, back down into the dirt on the other side. And that's when I saw this little half-buried log across the trail, some willows over here, some rocks over here. And I remember thinking, I'm either going to have to jump that or go around it, and that is the last thing I remember from the ride. And Gene knows where I'm going with this. The next thing I remember is waking up, recognizing that I was still on the trail, but I wasn't on my bike anymore, and I wasn't moving. In fact, I couldn't move my right arm. I was paralyzed. And my world was out of tune. We'll talk some more about that here in just a minute. But first, I'd like to pause here and say thank you first to Laura for that great introduction. Thank you so much for those kind words. And for those of you who are here tonight, thanks for coming. Woody Allen tells us that 80% of success in life is, anybody know? Showing up. Yeah, thanks, Gene. And by virtue of the fact that you're here tonight, that tells me you're the kind of people who show up. The kind of folks I like to hang out with. So thank you for giving me and my colleagues here the opportunity to spend some time with you tonight as we talk about people, profits, and productivity in 2017. Now, my part in the program is to help you find the proper perspective for prospering. Come on, you can do better than that. As we come out of the chute in 2017. So let's go back to my story. Oh, well, before we go back to my story, let me ask you another question. Let's just kind of check in with you a little bit here. Who here is already living a perfect life? Anybody perfect? You got the right amount of money, the right kind of car, the right kind of house. course not. If that were true, you wouldn't be here tonight, because the promise we've made is to give you some forward momentum, help you move in advance toward that perfect life. If you were already there, you wouldn't be here tonight. So, I got a news flash. It's not going to be a straight line. No matter what we say tonight, or what anyone else says, there are going to be boulders, detours, potholes, things you're going to have to get around. So the question then becomes, how are you going to respond to that? When you come up against that boulder, are you going to focus on the irritation you feel at having to take that detour? Or are you going to choose to see and enjoy the scenery you wouldn't have had the opportunity to enjoy otherwise? What are you going to see? What are you going to do? Plato told us 2,000 years ago to be kind, for everyone we meet is fighting that hard battle. Tells me something about you tonight. I want to tell you something about me. When you encounter that challenge, what are you going to do? Now we go back to my story. I woke up on that trail, my nose and mouth filled with the dust of the Utah desert. I was up to the next group of riders come along, find me laying there in the dirt, pulled out the cell phones, called 911, got emergency response. And during that 45-minute wait for the paramedics to show up there on the trail, I took a very cautious inventory of my body. Tried my left foot, yeah. Wiggle those toes. Wiggle the right toes. Left arm worked fine. Right arm, nothing. And in that moment of clarity, I understood my reality for the moment, if not the rest of my life. And I promise you, the very next thought that came to my mind, this is the honest truth. This is not going to be a Christopher Reeve moment. I'm not going to look like Superman, which is probably a good thing, because yeah, I'll wear the bike shorts, but I draw the line at Superman's bikini and tights. Tough crowd tonight. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right, good. Christopher Reeve. Yeah, you remember Christopher Reeve? The Superman movies. The first one came out in 1978. Christopher Reeve starred in that, blockbuster, and they managed to milk that for 3 more sequels. And during that, I didn't see any of them, so I don't know which one it was, but one of those movies required Christopher Reeve to learn how to ride a horse. Well, he found that he liked it. Became an equestrian. 1995, he was out riding his horse on a steeplechase course. And they came up on an obstacle, and the horse did what they call a reject. Planted his legs. And he went right over the head of the horse, broke his neck, became a quadriplegic, just like that. Thought of that. And something in my past had prepared me to see my situation differently. At that point, I knew that I could still walk. I could still run. I could learn to write with my left hand. I could give a hug. I could learn to drive. I could do all kinds of things. I'd lost some. But I could do a lot. This was not going to be a Christopher Reeve moment. I was going to be okay. What do you see? What do you do? Paramedics showed up. And they rolled me up on the backboard, slipped me into the ambulance. 45 minutes later, back down to the Moab emergency room, where we took x-rays. We found out that the reason that my arm was paralyzed was because my neck was broken. And I had a hard battle to fight. Well, Moab's a small town. They can take an x-ray, but they can't do an MRI. And in order to diagnose a spinal cord injury, you need an MRI. So they decided to call up to the regional hospital up in Grand Junction, ask them to send the Flight for Life chopper down for me. And they did. 30 minutes later, the helicopter landed. They wheeled me out there to the helipad, strapped me down the chopper, and the chopper lifted off for St. Mary's. Now this rescue that I described for you in about 8 minutes was actually several hours of chaos. But in that nice, gentle cruise up to Grand Junction, chaos melted away. And in that relative calm, I found myself considering the gravity of my situation. See, I knew that my neck was broken, my right arm was gone. And the question that came rushing in that I couldn't push away was, how much worse is it going to get? Was it going to lose my left arm too? What about my legs? Am I going to quit working before I even get to Grand Junction? And if you go just a little bit further down that line of thinking, you come to a pretty dark place. I'm not going to say that out loud. I'll let you get there on your own. But suffice it to say that I understood for the first time on a gut level something I'd known in my head for my entire life. And that is that tomorrow, not promised. Is there something you need to say to somebody close to you that you haven't said yet? Is there something you need to do with your kids or your grandkids that you haven't done yet? My friend Mitch is going to have some more to say about this here in just a minute, but let me say right now, time is short. Helicopter landed up there in Grand Junction. They wheeled me into the MRI machine, did the test, wheeled me back out. Neurosurgeon came over to give me the news. Yeah, Mark, no fooling. Neck's broken in 5 places. That's the bad news. Good news is there's no spinal cord damage. Doc, my arm's paralyzed. Yeah, Mark, the nerves that control your arm are badly bruised back up here at the nerve root. But the bruise is actually outside the spinal column, which means it will likely recover. And sure enough, it was only a matter of hours before I began to regain function in my right hand. At that point, I was given a great gift from the universe. It's not what you're thinking. You're thinking, no fooling, sport. You got to walk away from a broken neck. Am I right? I'm talking about what the neurosurgeon did. She trussed me up in a cervical collar and said, for the next 90 days, do not take this collar off under any circumstances. Well, that kind of cramped my style during the summer of 2012. There were things I would have liked to have done, things I would have gone to, things I would have liked to have seen. I couldn't go see and do with a cervical collar around my neck. This watershed event had brought my life to a sudden stop. I was given the gift of stillness for a change. 3 months to think about how I was going to restore harmony in my world that was so badly out of tune. So what did I think about during those long days and longer nights, hardly being able to move? Oddly enough, I thought about another friend of mine who's a pilot, another pilot. Name is Mark, also, just happens to be. Now let me take you back to 9/11 for just a minute. We were all devastated by what happened that day. But my friend Mark, more than most, see, one of the captains on one of those 4 jets that went down that day, Flight 93, it was the Let's Roll flight. You remember that flight? The passengers took it back over from the terrorists before, sadly, it crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Captain on that flight was Jason Dahl. Jason was Mark's friend and mentor at United Airlines. And that day, my friend Mark saw his friend Jason murdered by terrorists. A few months after that, Mark was diagnosed with cancer. And they found it in time. The surgery was successful. In time, I say, to find a second cancer in a different part of his body, this time in his thyroid. And again, they got the cancer out, but there was a complication this time. And one of the nerves that controls his vocal cords was nicked, and he was left without a voice. And something else I haven't told you about my friend Mark is that he travels all over the country inspiring our young people to live lives without limits. And I couldn't talk. And if you follow the airline industry at all for the last 15 years, you remember that in December of 2002, United Airlines entered what would become the most expensive bankruptcy in the history of commercial aviation. And as part of that cost-cutting effort, they cut pilot pay in half. In half! How do you manage a 50% pay cut? Well, let's see. I'll eat on even-numbered days. Yeah. 50%. My friend Mark couldn't make his house payment, lost the family home to foreclosure and personal bankruptcy. That's a heavy list. But you'd never know that any of it had happened unless you knew it had happened. See, my friend Mark is one of the most positive, optimistic, fun to be around people you'd ever want to know. How's that work? Several months after his vocal cords healed up, we were having dinner, I asked him about that. He said, it's simple. Challenges are inevitable. Sometimes life kicks you where it hurts. And you can either lay there and moan, or you can get up and move on with what's important. Simple, not necessarily easy. But because my friend Mark chose to get up, he was eventually able to recover from his personal tragedy, from his surgical complications, from his financial disaster. Just a few weeks ago, I got a text from him. And attached to the text was a photo, picture of a house that just closed on in July. First home they've been able to own since the bankruptcy. Because he was determined to get up. You know, I could hear his voice while I was laying there on that couch, watching NCIS reruns through a morphine-induced haze. How about it, Hardcastle? What you gonna do? You gonna lay there? You gotta get up. Okay. All right, so I got up, got back to work. 18 months later, my book was finished. The Symphony of Your Life, Restoring Harmony when Your World is Out of Tune. Stories about fighting through these challenges that we know are inevitable. People just like you. And winning. When these challenges show up, when you have these watershed events, what are you going to do? Are you going to lay there and moan? Are you going to get up? What are you going to choose to see? Are you going to see what you got left? Or what you've lost? Tonight, you're conducting the symphony of your life. From time to time, your symphony is going to go out of tune. How do you restore harmony? How do you respond when fortune challenges you at difficult times? President Calvin Coolidge suggested this: nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, "Press on," has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. I've enjoyed our time together tonight. In just a few minutes, we're going to have a panel discussion. And then if you'd like to continue the conversation one-on-one, I'd like to make that available to you. I'll be over here at the autograph table. Please come by, say hello, and we'll talk about putting together a one-to-one conversation. Thanks so much for listening. It's been a pleasure speaking to you tonight.